A NATO member, Turkey, has agreed to support Sweden and Finland's membership of the alliance. It had initially opposed the Nordic countries' bids to join the bloc. Turkey was angered by what it saw as their willingness to host Kurdish militants. But Russia strongly opposes the two states joining and has used the expansion of the West defensive military alliance as a pretext for its war in Ukraine. Its invasion of Ukraine seems to be having the opposite effect, with the path now being clear for Sweden and Finland to join NATO. Foreign ministers from the three countries have allegedly signed a joint security pact that addresses Turkey's concerns.
We have just finished a very constructive meeting with President Erdogan, President Niinistö, and Prime Minister Andersson. And I'm pleased to announce that we now have an agreement that paves the way for Finland and Sweden to join NATO. Turkiye, Finland and Sweden have signed a memorandum that addresses Turkey's concerns, including around arms exports and the fight against terrorism. No ally has suffered more brutal terrorist attacks than Turkey, including from the terrorist group PKK.
And for more on this interesting twist, global affairs analyst Calvin Dack joins me virtually from Washington. Good to have you join us.
Good to be here.
Now, this is a reversal by Turkish President Erdogan. He had taken a very tough stance earlier, blocking the move by Sweden and Finland to join NATO. But it does seem that the path is now clear for both countries to join the alliance, do you think?
Yes. And I think that this move by Turkey was very smart. It was smart in the sense that they obviously had their own domestic issues that they wanted to address. Their continuous fight against the PKK, Kurdistan Workers' Party, also the informal embargo, arms embargo that they had with Sweden and Finland. And so they were really savvy in using their veto power, or the non-consensus power, I should say, of accepting them to get their domestic goals achieved, and they did. So in that sense, I think it was very smart on Turkey's part.
But it does seem also that the Baltic Sea is about to be surrounded by NATO members. If Sweden and Finland joins the NATO, to take the number to 8, and this is what Putin was trying to fight against initially through the invasion of Ukraine. How do you think Moscow will react?
Well, I think it's very telling that before Putin's invasion of Ukraine, he wanted less NATO. And after the Ukraine invasion, and we're approaching month 5, he's now got more NATO. So I think that this definitely, for Putin, achieved the exact opposite of what he said he wanted. But it remains to be seen how this will affect the current security situation. We know that if the membership is finally approved, and it has to be ratified by the 30 countries' own national legislatures, if that happens, this will obviously present a security problem for Russia. But it's not quite clear exactly how it will address the current problem today of the ongoing invasion of Russia in Ukraine.
But I think President Putin has said that it will see this as an existential threat. Are we going to see more invasion coming from Russia, not just in Ukraine, but in maybe neighboring countries as well, who are now not necessarily part of NATO?
Well, in theory, you wouldn't, because you have NATO that's strengthening its alliance, and obviously combating Russia's expansion threats is a high priority for them. But in practice, what will NATO actually do, particularly if it involves a non-NATO member? And I think that is what Putin is looking for. Obviously, he doesn't want the expansion of NATO, but what he doesn't want even more is that NATO actually combating this expansion. And we've seen, when the Ukraine conflict first started, some of the NATO leaders, including the U.S., made it seem as if it wouldn't last long, that everybody was in solidarity of fighting the Russia threat, but he's still there and still committing atrocities in Ukraine. So it just depends on how NATO would respond for future expansion by Putin.
Let's look at this agreement between the three countries. We understand that there was a commitment to tackle threats to national security of Turkey. There's also an agreement to crack down on PKK terrorists with agreement on extradition. Now, what do you think, and I'm focusing on the word extradition, what do you think that this will mean for PKK, those who are affiliated to the PKK who are seeking safe or who are now being harbored in Sweden and Finland?
Well, I think they're obviously following this because, the European Union and the United States has designated the PKK as a terrorist organization. So obviously this is something that they are considering, that they won't have safe harbor in these countries. However, one of the things that I'm looking at is about the Kurdish journalists and those fighting for the Kurdish cause who may not be terrorists in everyone's eyes but Turkey. How will they be treated? And will Sweden and Finland be trading their, their neutral status in these kinds of situations for NATO membership? How will this affect those who are peacefully advocating for the Kurdish cause in Sweden and Finland and other places around Europe? That is going to be a difficult issue.
And the NATO summit has started. We understand that countries like Japan, Australia, there is South Korea who are also attending the meeting and not necessarily members of the alliance. We also know that the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, will be addressing the alliance virtually at some point. What sort of big news are you expecting from the summit?
Well, I think when it comes to the Asia participation, the strategic concept that NATO is going to be coming up with, it's rumored to be updated with the priorities and the principles of NATO members towards China and the Asia strategy. And I believe it's been over a decade since it's been updated in such significant fashion. So that will be interesting to see exactly what that, wording is. When it comes to Ukraine and Zelensky, I'm looking to see if he is going to push for NATO membership for Ukraine. That wasn't something he was specifically looking for at the beginning of the conflict. It wasn't something that a lot of NATO members wanted because they figured it would further and unnecessarily antagonize Russia. But look how things have changed. There wasn't even support in Sweden and Finland before this conflict, a majority support anyway, for joining NATO, and you see what's happening now. So those are the two things that I'm going to be looking for to see if there's been any movement on.
Absolutely. The impact of the war, not just on international alliances, but also on geopolitics around the world. Thank you so much for talking to us, Global Affairs Analyst Calvin Dark.
Thank you.